Hello, it's Tammy. How's everyone doing today? I wanted to address a particular topic that I've been sharing with people for a long time, but I haven't said anything here, and I see how it plays heavily into mental health, mental wellness, and including such issues as autism, addiction, stress, insomnia, you name it. It's really has to do with our wellness, and that is that the external world is a reflection of our internal world. Now, I've gotten into some rather heavy conversations about this because I have some rather interesting opinions as to the way the world is and how we experience it. But this has come up for a number of reasons today, and I thought, well, you know what, this is a really good opportunity to share this, so I thought I would. Part of it came from discussions that I've been witnessing around autism and our desire as a culture to help them recognize emotions in others. There was another young man that I know personally. He was kind of confronted because there was questions coming up around men being friends with men, strong male relationships or male-female relationships. And so I thought, my response to him actually was, well, we have a tendency to project our own interpretations and fears onto others. This kind of goes back to the video I did the other day with regards to kindness equaling wellness. It's not unlike that. We have these beliefs that aren't necessarily conducive to healthy living. They're just beliefs that we've established throughout our lives based on experiences that we've had, and we have a tendency to put that out there because they fester. And the interesting thing to me is, ever since I was a child, I never could understand why I could see everybody else except for myself, except when I sit in front of a camera or when I'm in front of a mirror. Other than that, I can't see myself. I am sitting, I'm on the inside of my body, and strange as that may sound, this was an awareness that I had from a very early age. And what I did with that was, I had a really hard time with that, actually, because nobody could answer the question. I ended up avoiding it for the longest time, and through my adulthood have come to realize that essentially the world is a mirror. The people around us are mirrors. And if I have a particular concern with something or someone, in the past I've previously done blame, gotten angry at the other person, judged, you name it. It was all the normal human reactions to things that I didn't care for. Until one day I recalled actually those thoughts that I had as a young child, and I thought, well, what would this be like if I stopped getting upset with somebody else and started looking at myself, and really posing these questions to myself. So, in the area of, say, for instance, lying, when somebody would lie to me or lie about something, keeping secrets or because they didn't want to share something, which is perfectly within their right, I was finding myself getting incredibly aggravated and angry. But what I did with it the last time was I began asking myself, where am I lying to myself? Because I can't control anybody else's lying. People have reasons to keep things private. But the fact of the matter is, it was a real rub with me. There was a lot of energy behind it, a lot of upset. And so I thought, well, that tells me that there's something not right within me. That's something that could actually be, kind of looked at, healed. Let's be kinder here. And so I began asking myself, well, where am I still lying to myself? And I began to discover some places where I was out of integrity with myself, where I'd say one thing and I'd do another, or I'd think one thing and then say another. So that lack of alignment was, in some terms, lying to myself. So really learning how to tighten that up. Now, am I 100% perfect at it? No, I'm not. I'm human, just like everybody else. But granting myself the leniency, if you will, to slip up and then being able to recorrect and move forward. But what I found in this exercise that I was doing with myself was that when people were dishonest for whatever reasons that I was recognizing, I didn't find the upset any longer. I just allowed them to be, knowing that if it was intentionally to be harmful or hurtful, or if there was something directed back at me, that ultimately they would be the ones that were going to pay the price. It would come back on them, and I could get through whatever was going to occur, should it occur, with as much dignity and grace as possible. But I always wanted to take the higher road. And so this is what I mean by the external world is a reflection of our internal world. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I've had several very deep discussions around this, because I can see how the world is, and when we talk about a collective thought process, it can be quite the conversation that would probably go on for days and days and days. Anyway, but how does this apply to autism and addiction and other mental health, mental wellness issues such as depression and anxiety? Well, it's huge. And in fact, as I've suggested in other videos, that I believe that most of us are living with some degree of, mental struggles, emotional struggles, because of what we're seeing, because of our own concerns and fears, and really finding a way to restore balance is probably the most important piece to beginning our road back to wellness. And especially when it comes to people who have a hard time communicating with the world. This doesn't necessarily mean just autism or special needs. This could be people who end up finding themselves in addiction. I find that population of people as troubled, if you will. I don't like to use the word troubled, but struggling as much as anybody with autism or special needs. It's just that their brain is wired differently, and so it just manifests and shows up differently, and it ends up becoming an addiction. Now, there's a lot of schools of thought around addiction, and including disease model, as well as being powerless and out of control, and to a certain degree, once the psychological and behavioral aspects get a hold of the individual, then absolutely there's a sense of loss of power. This is no different than an eating disorder. I'm sorry, I'm kind of fidgety here because I'm trying to get comfortable. And, it's no different than eating disorders. It's a lot of autoimmune disorders. We feel a loss of power. So, and the same thing happens in autism. If you think about it, we have a population of people that really struggles to communicate, and for that matter, make eye contact with people. And this is what prompted me again to want to speak about this, because I did see a particular device being researched to help these folks be able to read the emotions in others. And unfortunately, I don't know how beneficial that's going to be, because I feel like, from my perspective, and from having worked with autism and addiction and special needs as extensively as I have, my perspective is that these people already read the emotions. They already sense the emotions. And sometimes what happens here isn't what's happening inside. This is not always a good reflection of what's happening internally. And this is why we see in autism, they're actually, when they're afraid to make eye contact, it's a potential projection. It's not about the individual. It's more about how inadequate they feel because they can't keep up, because the way our society is currently operating, we're making them less than. We're kind of holding them in a position of disability when in fact it's not a disability. It's just a different operating system. And I know so many people have seen these, I don't want to call them postcards, but they're pictures and statements circulating all over social media that it's not a disability, it's just a different operating system. I completely agree with that. In fact, I believe that about everything. I believe that about every condition that we're dealing with. It's just a different operating system. I've talked to you before about how that it's all linked back to the immune system. Well, there comes a point where it actually is the hormonal. Let me back up a minute. The neuroendocrine system, because the hormones play a role with the immune system, as do the neurotransmitters. So when you have an imbalance in one, you have an imbalance in the whole thing, which is going to upset the immune system. And so as far as I'm concerned, no matter what health condition, no matter what label, what diagnosis, it's all down to a different operating system. And if we work with the operating system, then we have a better shot at actually restoring wellness. And a lot of it comes from the operator. You know, you are your own operator, I am my own operator. And so it begins with the way if we see something in the world that we don't like, if we just step back and not blame ourselves for anything, but just kind of begin to look at where is it in ourselves there's this disconnect, where I am not being as kind as I could be, or where am I judging and interpreting. You know, it's just this young man that I was interacting with earlier today was concerned because people are approaching him because he and his roommate are best friends and they do everything together, and there's this projection of being gay, and you know, and he's a very sensitive man, and so he fortunately asked the question, is this really how this looks to the world? And my response to him was, it's just their interpretations and their own fears that they're projecting. Now, how does that, what do I mean by that? Well, I think there's a lot of judgment about, we have these things based on our experiences. We have these interpretations based on our experiences. And if we experience, you know, if we are not familiar with two men doing things together a lot, or two women doing things together a lot, or for that matter, a man and a woman just being friends, there's a lot, like I said, this gets really, really deep. But there's a lot of interpretations that come up around all of these based on our own personal experiences. Mine, in particular, happens to be around infidelity. It happened, I witnessed it in my childhood within my own family. I then recreated it in my life as an adult. And I had it happen in my own relationship. And so for the longest time, I actually lived in fear of men and women, and not trusting women to actually be, you know, to respect my relationship. Pardon me. So based on those interpretations, it's real easy for me to go, well, men and women shouldn't be friends. You know, if a man contacts me, he just doesn't want to be friends, and vice versa. So these interpretations that I have and everybody else has, if we don't manage them properly, we end up giving them and projecting them onto somebody else, and then, you know, basically stating, well, you're gay, or you're trying to come in and get in the middle of my relationship and cause problems. Some of those people might actually be doing that. I'm not saying that they're not. What I am saying is until we actually manage our own emotional issues around it, it's going to harbor problems. I'll give you an example. So in the area of male-female relationships, okay, and let's just say, for instance, just take me for example. I'm in a relationship and I don't trust women. And what ends up happening is I end up being nasty towards my partner because every time he interacts with another woman, I think something is going to happen. I think that he's going to be unfaithful. And unless I manage my own insecurities around that and heal myself and address those issues from the past, I'm going to continue to project those fears onto my partner. And then it's going to create issues in our relationship. And he might actually tell me, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. This is crazy making. I've not been unfaithful, but you know what? I'm out. I actually have created a situation through lack of awareness. That is what I'm getting at when I say the external world is a reflection of our internal world. So to back up a minute and just say, well, if he's interacting with a woman and now I become anxious about it, if I stop and talk to myself and explore what is it about that dynamic or that potential, that just the dynamic between a man and woman relationship, if I explore that within myself and I come to the realization and I start, doing forgiveness work and whatever else I might need in order to kind of find a balance, then there's no rub in my relationship. And then we can actually have a healthy conversation about it. That's what I'm getting at. This isn't this sounds very simplistic. And what I am aware of is that we are a microcosm. The world is a macrocosm. Our families are a macrocosm of the microcosm. And so if we start here and work our way out, we can actually affect a larger healing, global wellness. We can really affect the people around us in a much more positive way and begin to have the healthy conversations. This is the bridging the gap. This is where kindness matters. This is where I see a very huge potential with the children on the planet, especially our autism population, because they are, well, I don't want to just limit it to autism, because there's a population of people, like I said, with that have on the spectrum, that on an autism spectrum, I include schizophrenia in that, again, any other other wellness concerns, addiction. Anybody who finds themselves stressed and anxious or depressed and scared, these are the people that we have the opportunity to help, and actually ask them to teach us, because there's a balance here. Now, I'm pausing for a moment because what I want to say is that these people are seeing things, they're sensing things. And when I say see, I don't necessarily mean with our eyes. They're sensing things in the world. They don't know how to talk about it, whether they are nonverbal or verbal. They have amazing gifts. And like I said earlier, every health condition, regardless if you want to label it mental or physical, is actually a different operating system. And the neurochemistry balance is the most important balance that we can work on rectifying. And that does begin with the way we talk to ourselves. So when it comes to autism, we are teaching, if we stop treating them as if they're a disability and actually recognizing it again as a different operating system, we can begin to model different ways, especially if we're doing this with ourselves. This is why it has to start here. I can't go into, a classroom with people or a therapy program that's working with autism and teach these children how, and tell them how to be and show them how to interact when the rest of the world isn't modeling that for them. They are just they are reflecting what's going on inside of us. And that's what brings me back to the external, or external is a reflection of the internal. As the caretakers and the teachers and the therapists and everybody else that's involved with anyone with addiction in treatment facilities, behavioral disorders, PTSD, ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, you name it. If you're helping people, it starts with you. Like I said, this is the microcosm, and then how we interact with other people is actually going to raise our ability to speak with them in a healthier manner and eliminate the toxicity. I don't know if this is making any sense, because my mind is racing as I'm speaking. And so the intent here is to kind of rein it in, just kind of bring it back a little bit. And like I say, begin to pay attention to how we are looking at the world, interacting with the world, and beginning to model this for our kids, and actually allowing these special needs, and which includes autism, to actually reflect back to all of us the pieces that we're missing. Why is it so troublesome that somebody doesn't speak? I don't know how many times I've heard, be able to sit in the same room with someone and never say a word. I've actually watched documentaries where people were, I was even engaged with a mother of another autistic child over in, I think she's in England, over in Europe earlier today. And the ways that she's managed to design techniques to be able to communicate with her son. There's another young man that I interact with in Australia that he's done the same thing. He's found other ways of communication. We don't need words to communicate. The animals communicate all the time without words. Yes, they do have sounds, but there are other ways to communicate. And I've seen some really amazing techniques done by teachers and therapists who have engaged people that are nonverbal and invited them to step up and actually communicate, and through their own mechanisms. And so this is just a really brilliant opportunity for us to stop worrying about what they're not saying and paying attention and meeting them at their level. This doesn't mean that we can't help them integrate and be able to communicate with us, because yes, there are words, but think about the beauty of this. Before there were words, we had an entirely different form of communication. There was an authenticity to it that is now missing greatly. And this is my concern when we start using devices to help these people read emotions on the face, because this isn't necessarily, I have a hard time understanding how that could be a reflection of what's going on inside, because if it's just representative of what's being seen visually, it's not going to represent what's being felt internally. And how many times have you seen people say something positive and shake their head no? I see it quite often. Body language and the nonverbal communication is extraordinarily powerful. And so, learning from those who are nonverbal, learning from those, and again, this is not limited just to autism. There's a great deal of people on this planet that are nonverbal, and we have a lot to learn from them because they've learned other ways to be able to communicate. I was working with a young man in his 30s with muscular dystrophy who had no ability to speak. But I'll tell you what, he was able to tell me exactly what he needed through his eyes and through his sense of smell. That's another very important component. And we can actually be able to connect to to the nonverbal through the sense of smell, and be able to read their eyes and watch their body language. They are some of the most authentic people. And so to call anybody disabled mentally and emotionally, I can see the emotional disability. I think most of us have emotional disabilities, but the mental disability, not so much. I think we're just, like I said, we're just different operating systems. And being able to help make that connection and stop projecting our fears onto them and actually allowing ourselves to learn from them as we can help them learn from us. This is the bridging of the gap. And again, I want to say this begins with us on the inside. This is extraordinary work. There's a lot of people who have been tasked, and I mean that in a divine manner, to work with all of these people in the school systems and in therapy programs. There are some amazing people, and I had the distinct pleasure of beginning to meet them a long time ago when my oldest son entered the school system. And there's not enough words to express my gratitude. But like I said, words sometimes lose their meaning as we discount words lose their meaning when we discount our feelings, and we don't. We're dishonest with what's really going on, or we hold back because we're afraid. This is a difficult muscle to build. This isn't, we want to be able to do this 100% across the board, simply because we're not all there yet. So it's going to take some time and effort. And so learning how to navigate through your day, understanding who you can speak to and who is maybe you can't, is important. But again, Noam Chomsky is somebody that I am very inspired by, and his studies on the language are amazing. And his work has inspired a lot of my, the way I look at people, the way I look at those who struggle to communicate with words. And I'm beginning to really recognize the authenticity that comes through the eyes. No matter who, whether you use words or not, you can see what's going on in the eyes. And so being able to recognize something in someone else, using it as a tool to get to know yourself better, because everybody around you is a perfect mirror. And if we can just be easier on ourselves and recognize that, no, we can't make 100% change here. It would be nice. It would be really wonderful to see, just things change like that. But right now, it only starts with one person, and that's with ourselves. And then from there, it changes the way we interact with others, creating healthier dialogues, healthier dynamics, more powerful ways of interacting. Because if you think about it, addiction really is about the loss of power, feeling powerless. As I mentioned earlier, autism feels powerless. Special needs, they all feel powerless because because the world is judging and interpreting them and basing their interactions off of what they see physically, as opposed to what they actually see and what we can connect with. And when we can't connect to others authentically until we get really clear in ourselves what scares us about those who are nonverbal or those who have physical differences. We have to pay attention to what's going on here within ourselves, and then be able to articulate that in a manner that is authentic. And that actually helps. When we reclaim our power, we actually empower somebody else to stand in theirs and begin to interact in a much different way. And just imagine being in a family where there is a nonverbal special needs child, and nobody is handing that person an iPad or
they've just created this dialogue that is amongst themselves that is just incredible, and this person feels fully themselves. Now, that brings me to my next thought, which is the issues with special needs, and this was one of my own, was, well, how's the world going to treat my child once that child becomes an adult? And it is a scary thing. And there's a lot of faith that comes into that. But really, again, if we can give our kids the tools and get past our own fears and address our fears and our interpretations of what could potentially happen, and just empower the fool out of these people, they will find their way. They will be taken care of. They will make it. And again, I wish I could speak about 100% across the board, but this is my perspective. This is my dream, and this is my hope to actually begin to support people to really better integrate the way they feel with the way they interact with the world. And that's a lot of the reason why I use the oils, because they assist with the neurochemistry, like I mentioned. So it comes from the way we talk to ourselves, the way we allow ourselves to be human and have the wounds and work with ourselves. From there, you begin to take the steps to kind of stabilize a little bit. Consider that when you're in chronic heightened state of stress, because you're worried, because all, life is happening and there's some crazy making things going on in the world, this is going to exacerbate our stress. Those children that I referred to earlier, and any of the special needs folks, they are reflecting, they see this in us, so this is going to heighten their anxiety. This is a very important piece that I think is, I really want to get across to people. If we talk about the external reflecting the internal, consider that when we see our kids and our special needs adults, and we see addiction issues, that this is just their way of mirroring back to us what they see. This isn't them acting out. This is not bad behavior. This is them saying, this is what we see. We see this in you. They're projecting onto us their own fears because they see it in us. So we become this perfect mirror of one another. And if we want to be able to communicate with them and they want to communicate with us, really helping to stabilize the neurochemistry so that when they see it in us, they can potentially help us find a way out of our own diaper. Like I said, we're all human, and sometimes it takes a powerful reflection, and it doesn't necessarily mean your best friend. It could very well be your child with special needs, reflecting to you exactly what you need, and reflecting back to you that it's time to pay attention and find a different way of communicating with yourself. So that's what I have for today, and I appreciate you joining me. I look forward to any questions that you may have and contacting me. My email address is tammy.davis8@gmail.com. And until then, have a beautiful evening. Bye now.